I just need to bury it for a while, Aloy, but only for a while. Here's your looking new Spin Master PlayStation, The Shapes Collection, Horizon Forbidden West, Varl. Discover the strength of the Nora tribe with the official Varl 6-inch figure from the Shapes collection. Pick up this loyal warrior crafted with over 138 distinctive finishes and textures by Daniel Salas Bennett and painted by Dungeon Chow. This meticulously detailed figure features Varl's warrior braids and weathered gear with over 32 points of articulation for dynamic posing. Accessories include 2x handsets for various grips and his formidable axe ready for challenge. Showcase this Varl figure on your shelf in your collection today. He may be the son of a war chief, but when it comes to figures, Varl is at the front of the line. Just before, of course, we get a closer look at the new Shapes collection, Horizon Forbidden West, Varl. I'd like to thank, if I can, the folks over at Spin Master who were kind enough to provide this sample. According to many online sites, Varl is actually slated to drop in October 2024. Anybody that's currently looking at their calendar will know right now that we're actually well into October, so the figure listing should be showing up any time now. The figure, though, of Varl is going to stand at almost 6 inches in height. He's really only just a few hairs short of that, and that works out to be a figure that's about 15 centimeters tall. I suppose in hindsight, we probably should have looked at Horizon Forbidden West Aloy first, but the review of that figure will be coming up shortly. In the meantime, though, let's bring in the things that we've already had a look at from the Shapes collection. First of all, here's what the figure looks like along with the God of War's Kratos. And also as well, following up that review, we also looked at his son Atreus. Varl isn't, though, as big as Kratos, but he certainly is a little bit bigger than Atreus here. Not a whole lot to cover when it comes to Varl's accessories. The figure only comes included with a pair of swappable hands and his trusty axe. The thing about his hands, though, is that you'll see on one side, the figure does have a gripping hand, and then on the other side, the figure does have a closed fist. If you wanted to have the mirror flip to one another, then the figure does also come included with a gripping hand. That's going to go on this side, right? And then he's also coming included with a closed fist. That's going to go on this side. I would probably rather have, especially considering that he has the means to hold his axe, probably have the figure holding the axe with both of these hands. So for that, let's actually just pick up Varl here. We'll wiggle the hand and remove it from the post. Careful, careful, careful. The one thing I will say, though, about the posts, and I've changed these only a couple of times, is that the posts become a little stubborn the first time you do it, just primarily because the posts are so long. I feel like they probably could have easily used shorter posts, but I'm sure there must have been a method to the madness. We're just going to plug that back in place. There we go. And now Varl has, instead of one punching fist, now he has 2 gripping hands, so of course, to hold his axe. Speaking of his axe, that is the only other included accessory that has the figure with it. The figure does come included, like I said, with his axe. The axe is made of fairly soft plastic. You probably already noticed right now that there's a hole right through the handle. This actually can attach on the back of his fur pelt. I'll show you guys how that works in a second. The blade does look pretty mean, like it could inflict some serious damage. I think for what it is, it's nicely painted here. Of course, you got the blade done here in a lighter silver. You got the roping there in a more lighter brown. Some brown making down basically the appearance all the way down to the end of the handle. And of course, you got little bands of darker brown added in there as well. You can take the axe and you can obviously fit this into his hands. And he does have a bend in his elbow. And because the bend of the elbow is the way that it is, you could technically, let me just get his fingers pried a little bit away from themselves. You can get him really to hold the axe in both his hands. Might even, in fact, be even a little bit easier if I get him to hold it on this side first. Honestly, the only thing that's really getting in the way of things is his thumb. This thumb of his will always be getting in the way, and you might even find yourself a couple of times having to go back and correct the thumb. With the thumb hopefully out of the way, get out of the way, thumb. Maybe what we'll do is slide it down this way. That way I don't even have to worry about the thumb at all. So plug it in on one side and then basically just attach the hand to the other side. There we go. Now you got Varl holding the axe with both of his hands. You could probably do a little bit more of an interesting pose than what I've got going on right now. Let's just correct his head. There we go. What you can also do too, as I already mentioned, is if you want to remove the axe altogether, there's a hole right here, and on the back of his pelt, there's a peg right here. It's actually kind of hard to make out the peg. In fact, my finger is covering over top of it. But the peg, you basically just take the axe and attach it on like that. And he holds it fairly well. It seems also to be the case that you could probably remove his cape and remove the fur pelt. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Let's just take for right now at least the axe. We'll put it off to the side. From the head sculpt standpoint, I think it looks a lot like Varl from the game. Of course, he does have the marking there of the blue on the side of his face. Nicely painted in beard, and the way they've also painted his hair is nicely done there as well. I don't think I would have any necessarily changes I would make to the character. I think it looks a fair bit like him as well. Now, like I said, he is wearing a pelt. The pelt, for all intents and purposes, looks like it can be removable. He does also have this standalone cape that only sticks on one side of his body. If you look at underneath the pelt, there is a peg that's essentially taking the cape and attaching it to his torso. If you don't like the cape, you can remove it altogether. Just a case of just removing it. I'm not really sure why I would remove it, because, I mean, now I have to find a place to put this cape. But at least if you wanted to, you could take this off, and it's made of a fairly soft material. From all intents and purposes, it also seems like you'd be able to remove his torso, his pelt altogether as well. It looks like it's probably been glued here, but I feel like you might be able to fit this over top of his head. Maybe even, in fact, pop the head off first. Slide this all the way off. Now, I mean, really, once you take this off, this is essentially what you'd be looking at underneath. Some would say that's not as exciting. I mean, with all the amount of time and care that they spent to paint many of the layers of paints, I feel like I would rather honestly leave the pelt on, but I'm only kind of removing it partially to show you that it is removable on the figure if you want. Just knowing the headache of what it would be to get this back over top of his body, I'm actually going to just leave the pelt where I left it, right where it belongs. I'm just going to fit that back over top of his body. And while we're at it, you know what? I'll leave the cape off just because it's going to be a little bit easier looking at the figure's articulation. Like looking at his head sculpt, really happy with that. Looking at the way they painted the pelt, I like the way they've done that as well. Some nice additional white's been added there as well. I like that they've added a little brushing. There's a lot of layers of paint. If anything could be said, really, for the shapes collection that we're getting from Spin Master, time has really been afforded with a lot of paint applications. I don't think you would really be looking at characters like this and thinking to yourself, wow, they really skimped on paint. There's everything, quarters, territories that normally need not be covered. They have definitely gone in there and painted everything. Now, unfortunately, here's some of the disappointing things. The figure does have, first of all, a sheathed sword. The sword is not removable. The sword is permanently molded to the sheath. It's only there more for decorations. He does also have arrows on a quiver on the side, on the other side of his body. Again, you can't remove them. Technically, though, Varl doesn't come included with a bow, so there's really no real need then to obviously start to remove arrows. But those are basically there for decoration more than anything else. These are attached by only thin strands of plastic. You can see how they only attach to the top of his belt. This gets afforded at least 2 strips of plastic. This only gets actually 1, so you want to be careful of those. But nice color, though, of the red. We got the green there for the legs. Got some additional white added there for the fronts of his boots. Very nicely painted figure all around. Even if you're not as much familiar with Horizon Forbidden West, you have to certainly say, though, there's a lot of time and patience that went into painting this guy carefully. Now, for the figure's articulation, we're going to go back to the head sculpt here of Varl, which, again, I'm really, really impressed with. Head's going to be on a ball joint. Now, because he has these pelts on either side, the shoulders don't get really in the way of things at all when it comes to rotating his head. In fact, easily, you can move his head down and up, back and forth. In addition to just the ball joint we're looking at alone for his head, Varl also has a secondary ball joint. It's right there. You can't see because my finger's in the way. Sorry, get my finger out of the way. There's a ball joint actually at the base of the neck, so you can also move it there as well. The upper torso is also going to be on a ball joint. Whether you decide to keep the pelts in place or you want to remove them, it doesn't seem to affect either way rotating his torso. The only thing I did do, though, obviously, is I left the cape off. I don't think it necessarily would have impeded the articulation. In fact, if you want to put it back onto his body, just plug that onto the peg. There we go. Super easy, too. Like one of my worries was that this was going to be a very thin plastic, and that kind of soft plastic, you know, of course, when you push down on it, it would just bend down. No, it actually seems that they've used a hard enough plastic. So if you want to remove the cape, putting the cape on is just as easy as taking it off. With the cape there in place, yeah, you can see, doesn't do anything at all to get in the way of his torso articulation. As for his arms, they also do rotate all the way around. Ever so often, though, you might find himself clipping the side of his quiver or also the sheath of his sword. Again, you can also take his arms. You can bring them out at 90 degrees. The figure does have not necessarily a swivel here in his bicep. I feel like that could have been an ideal place to accommodate some additional articulation. Oh, actually, there is some articulation. I keep kind of getting confused with this section of his arm. So there's a swivel in his bicep. There's then a hinge in his elbow. And then right here where there's the wrappings of his forearms, that also rotates as well. So there is 1, there's 2, and then there's an elbow hinge in between. And of course the hands do rotate all the way around. As for his legs, just getting things out of the way of the quiver, you can split the legs easily enough. Even though he's got the skirting there on the sides, the skirting is actually made of softer plastic. So when it comes to splitting his legs, you shouldn't have too much of an issue. Although maybe with this side, you might have a little more of an issue just because things get in the way of things like his sheath, like the little skirt that he has on the side. Might get a little bit more in the way of things. But you can also bring his legs forward. You can bring his legs back. There is a swivel 3/4 of the way up Varl's leg. There's also as well a single hinge in his knee. Technically, it is really a double hinge. The hardest thing about this, though, is even though there's a hinge and a hinge here, even if you had him in a running pose like this, you would definitely need to use yourself a display stand because the figure, unfortunately, will not balance well on his own. Like, though, the way they've actually hidden the joints. I mean, you more so see the joint right here for the top of the hinge of his knee. You actually don't really usually see the one that's down below here because it's being covered over by this knee guard. There's no swivel here. While I made the mistake of saying there was no swivel at the top of the bicep, there is actually no swivel down below here for the boots, but again, they're nicely molded and painted. He has ankle pivot back and forth. He has ankle rocker also there as well. And the figure does also have pegals in the bottoms of his feet. The only thing I would say, and this is one thing I did mention when we looked at both Kratos and Atreus, is I do wish like the figure line could have come included with display stands. I think it certainly would have been a nice touch, considering really when you look at the accessory count for Varl, his accessory count is rather low, with only really, again, 2 swappable hands, and of course his trusty axe over off to the side here. I think really they could have afforded the amount of budget to go into making display stands for these characters. Just think of it, if you will, like a rectangular or even a circular display. I think probably circular display stands probably make the most sense. And then just have, of course, the shapes collection across the top. It didn't necessarily have to be specific to the game, so it didn't have to say Horizon Forbidden West. I think if anything, it probably could have just said the shapes collection and have each one of the characters all being respected, all kind of being within that same toy line by having all the same unique display stands that are only exclusive to them. Again, bringing back in the other characters that we had a look at. God of War's Kratos, and of course we also had a look at his son Atreus. We are also going to be continuing on, maybe not in the upcoming review, but another character that does make appearance in the Horizon Forbidden West is Aloy. We're going to be looking at her as well in an upcoming review. Again, I really like the look of this line as a whole. You can really see there's a lot of time and care that went into painting of these. Well over 100 paint applications. You can probably see a lot more of it, I think, being exhibited here on Varl. Of course, with the accommodations of the green, the beige, the browns are all really nice layered effects that they've added on top of it, replicating the costume that he has in the game. So it seems that October 2024 is the magic month for many of these shapes dropping online. It's not to say, though, that you couldn't find these in stores, but if you're one that specifically likes to order your stuff from, say, Entertainment Earth. Entertainment Earth, for example, does have pre-order listings right now of Horizon Forbidden West Varl. The figure's going to be going for $29.99, which seems to be the same asking price as all the other shapes collection, no matter the shape or size. Kratos was $29, and also his son, Atreus. Now, I will say from an accessory standpoint, Varl maybe comes up a little bit short, as he only comes included with a pair of swappable hands, and of course he comes included with his axe. The axe does have at least some storage space on the back of his fur pelt, so if you don't want it necessarily in his hands, not sure really why you wouldn't, you can at least attach it somewhere else. As shown in this review, you could remove the cape if you want to. You can also remove his shoulder pads altogether if you want to. But I think it adds to the charm of the character, and really, once you remove them, what are you really going to be doing with them anyways? Putting them away in a bag with the extra fist that you're not using? That's nonsense. Get a chance for this figure to really shine with all the layers of paint applications that Spin Master has afforded the Shapes collection so far. As already mentioned, we will be looking at Aloy, also from Horizon Forbidden West, that will be coming up in an upcoming review. But in the meantime, though, I'd like to thank the folks over at Spin Master that provided this sample of the brand new PlayStation The Shapes Collection Horizon Forbidden West Varl Nora Valiant Armor. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. Have you guys also ever played Horizon Forbidden West? Let me know down below in the comments section. If you guys also enjoyed this video, do it a solid, throw it a like. You guys want to stick around for more so? I hope so. And certainly make sure you hit that subscribe, turn on that bell, but the most important thing is that you're coming back to this channel. Whatever we aren't looking at when it comes to the Shapes collection, we will be more than making up for it with other videos that are always coming here on a regular basis. So making sure that you're coming back, checking back regularly to see what the guy behind the camera is always doing. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.